I think that's the whole point, though. I think that's where we are being led is to remember that it is all here and it's all a gift to us, and we actually don't own the things, and the land is free, and we should all be walking it in ways that are more in a oneness perspective with each other and the earth. And so,
Welcome to Exploring the Edges. Let's get into it.
welcome everyone to Exploring the Edges. Today on Exploring the Edges, we are going to talk about week 6 of the Artist's Way, where we're focused on abundance. And so hopefully this episode will give everyone some fun ideas to try at home of new things that you might do to feel more abundant in your life. And so I thought we would start by each kind of going around and telling what does abundance mean to us and why is it an important topic to talk about.
That's great. It's a great lead in. This morning, Jen and I were actually talking because we did our reflection for this week. And there's this idea of what is creative luxury?
Luxury.
And so Jen and I sort of talked about that this week, and we had sort of a different view on it.
Yeah.
But just kind of peeling back to abundance. What does abundance mean to me? It's a big question.
Yeah, it is. Did you have something that you wanted to share first, Christy?
Sure. I feel for me, what I notice is that abundance is a nervous system state within my body. So when I don't feel safe is when I'm not feeling abundant. But when I regulate my nervous system, it allows me to tap into pleasure within the body, subtle energies within the body, and then everything, exploring the depths of myself is an option. But I can't do that without that safe nervous system. And so for me, I think that would be the definition of how I view abundance. And then why it's important to me is so that life isn't boring, because when I feel frozen or stuck and I'm ending up scrolling or bed rotting, those types of things where your nervous system isn't working properly and you don't want to do simple things like walking in nature, then your life doesn't feel quite as abundant. So for me, it was really learning how to regulate my nervous system. And I have said before that I did a lot of prepping about 5 years back to 2020 or so. And once I balanced my nervous system, I really felt that safety without all the stuff. And I didn't need the stuff as much to feel abundant. So that's been a big switch for me.
Yeah, that's so well put.
Yeah.
Do you want to go next? I think you can.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like all of that's super important. Having a balanced nervous system is key. I think in order, maybe not even as abundance, but in order to be able to be open to abundance. And I know, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before because time doesn't exist anyway. You can watch that episode. But just when we were talking about the wishes and feeling satisfied and content with what we had, but then being open to more, and abundance kind of feels like gratitude in some ways. Every day when we sit down for our meal, one of the things that I'm grateful for and that I is the abundance before me. Whether it's just a little banana pancake, it just feels very abundant, with the oats and the bananas and the cinnamon. We have spices in it.
Yeah.
So being just grateful for the abundance that is there, but being open to more as well. Because I think it could be very simple things, and it could be very big things, could be abundance.
Yeah.
And I think
I wonder for you, if it feel the food is definitely because you're a chef and because you put a lot of time and effort into food, and probably a lot of the knowledge you hold is about the medicinal effects of something like cinnamon being a thermogenic and an anti-inflammatory, and some of the depth of knowledge you hold that makes you feel abundant because you understand what you're doing and the magic that's going into making the food in front of you and the ceremony. Maybe you could share a little bit about that, how in the moment of making food, how it feels to you, as you're creating.
For sure. And I think it stems back to the gratitude also of having the food, is having the ingredients to make the food, or the knowledge, or even the creativity, if we're going to weave it into the artist's way of, for a while we didn't have oat flour, so I was making it with like something else and hoping that it worked out. Sometimes you just hope it works out and you get creative and it's delicious. But even beyond the knowledge of, like you say, cinnamon is for thermogenics and regulating blood sugar and knowing what kind of cinnamon to put, because there are different kinds of cinnamon and one is better than the other. For these medicinal properties, I think it also comes down to gratitude and being grateful for the abundance that you already have, recognizing the abundance that's already in your life. So, because you cannot be open to more if you're not already recognizing it. If you're coming from a place of lack, like, oh, I wanted banana pancakes, we had to have plain pancakes, we didn't have bananas, and we didn't have any other fruits, then I don't know that there's space for more abundance to come in because you're already not recognizing it. Like if you're not hearing the quiet messages from your heart, there's no space for like the big ones from your soul to come in, if you're not recognizing abundance before you, whether it's like in your food or whether it's you want to create something and you have a whole bunch of pencils, like pencil crayons and they're already sharpened, or you have pencil crayons and markers and this, that, and the other thing. If you're not recognizing the abundance that's already there, maybe it's hard to bring more in. So abundance to me, kind of to come back to your question, just sort of feels like having everything that you need, to do the
And
thing.
also, would you say a lot of sharing, like being able to like share what you make? Because I don't know, maybe some people can check out your Instagram, or you have so many beautiful meals photographed there. They're like, don't just look like they taste good. They are pieces of art within themselves. So I'm sure like taking that piece of art and setting it in front of someone has got to feel like you're giving them a gift every day,
Yeah, it feels really wonderful. And honestly, I feel like the food tastes better when it's shared. And, Jack is always really appreciative and it's exciting to feed it to her because she's always excited.
I know it's a gift. I do know it's a gift, and it is. And I think part of the process of recognizing abundance is like not stopping at the surface. You could say like, oh, I'm really grateful. Like something that Jen has been a teacher to me on is like, like when she first introduced this idea of like, we can be grateful for the banana pancake, and we could be grateful for the bananas and we can see them growing on the tree. And then we can sink a little further, and this is what Jen has taught me, like we can be grateful for whoever nurtured the bananas and grew the crops. And she's taught me we could be grateful for how they were transported to us. We can be grateful for the guys who drove the trucks or the women who drove the trucks. We can be grateful for the person who stood at the local grocery store and like sold us the banana. And so it's this process of deepening, and then even there's layers underneath that. We could be grateful that we have the time to sit and sink into this state of gratitude and abundance. We could be grateful for sharing it with each other. We can just keep going deeper and deeper. And I think that's sort of part of the process, I think, of abundance for me is, as I feel like it's reciprocity. It's like it's the exchange. It's the exchange of the gifts from Gaia and our gratitude. And so that's what feels like abundance is, when everybody wins, this concept of like win-win, everyone wins. What we're doing is for all. And I think
even a composting bucket, right? Like just throwing our scraps in a composting bucket and putting them back in the earth feels like a magical practice to me. And even though the trash is right there, and I know it all goes to the dump and it gets composted there, but just because it's like a ceremonial piece of making food and reciprocating back to the earth to feed it a little bit with those minerals.
Yeah, and we have not, but we've been keeping this little bag of scraps for there's a woman who raises like happy chickens.
That's a great idea.
So we just put like our little like kale stems and like we don't know a lot about raising chickens, but we have this bag in our freezer for maybe one day giving it to the chickens as like a snack.
Yeah, we can't compost right now. There's not a local program and we moved in the winter, so everything is like frozen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We just I throw it in the snow a lot of times and just wait till the spring. It'll melt at some point, but
Pros would love it.
So maybe Jacqueline, do you have anything like different to add about what you feel abundance is to you?
Yeah, I just really think that it's setting up systems and ways of being and ways of thinking where there's enough for everybody and not just enough for human beings, for the non-human beings also. And I feel like, regenerating land projects and that this feels like abundance to me is having enough resources to move out of scarcity and then start to pour all of that into what's around you, And this feels like abundance to me because oftentimes we're not thinking about our neighbors or our lands or the bugs that want to eat our compost. Like we're not thinking about any of that when we're in survival mode.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like this too.
And so it's very important to acknowledge that it is a privilege, it is a privilege to even be able to have thoughtful conversations about what abundance is. If you're someone who's like, yeah, I've never really felt this deep gratitude, and it is a practice. It's not as if the first time you sit down in a gratitude practice, you have these really deep transcendental visions and journeys into gratitude. It's a practice. It's a daily practice. It's a commitment. It's a devotion. And so I feel like just being able to devote my love feels very abundant. I'm being showered. Like every time Jen hands me anything, it doesn't have to be food,
Yeah.
like she hands me like a blanket sometimes when I'm on the couch reading, and like I'm so deeply grateful for that. It's support and love, and it just feels like this big circle that's spinning, and I just feel very grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah, and maybe even just feeling into where you are not in scarcity mode as a place to start, because I know that a lot of times it feels like abundance, if you say that, it comes down to financial, being able to buy the things you want or
for sure.
pay your rent or buy your groceries or things like this. And I'm feeling into that too. I mean, we talked about taking time off, and I've been doing a lot of that lately, and it's a hit, but where are we abundant? Like where are we already out of scarcity mode? And if it's in love or if it's in time or if it's in
nature,
yeah, the ability to like help somebody else or the ability to compost
Your relationships and
your
your life.
relationships, then maybe that's a place to start. And
Your
maybe
faith. Like,
yeah, exactly. And maybe if you start there, then it will start to spread into other areas of your life, slowly.
I think this is an interesting tie-in to the conversation that we were having about creative luxury. Do you mind if I share that story?
Sure. Yeah.
So Jen and I were talking about creative luxury, and I said, well, Jen, like, what is creative luxury for you? And Jen had said, like, it's really about having the time to create, not feeling like you have to create this, 45-minute window before, I can create during this time. And do you want to say anything else about that?
No, that was pretty much it. Just not feeling limited by time and I guess financial resources, because sometimes that feels like that buys the time if you don't have to go to work and you don't have these other things hanging over you, where you could create for 5 minutes if you wanted, or you could create for 5 days if you wanted,
or 5 years.
And you don't have any restraints on it. Like that feels like luxury, just to be able to do anything you want and have the time to do it and not have to cancel things or figure out where you can squeeze it in.
And then I shared with Jen that for me, creative luxury for me felt like, like having the big Crayola box with like all of the colors, all of the crayons. And Jen has colored pencils, and she doesn't have like the 25 pack. She has like the 100 pack. Do you know what I mean? It's all of the colors. That feels like creative luxury, and having like all of the teas, the herbs for the blend, like having them all, you see those like Pinterest, like all the big jars. That feels like creative luxury. And I was telling, like, even having some of the software that Jen has shared with me for me to work on like digital art, luxury to have these software programs. And I think in that conversation, we were just reflecting on how interesting it is how our views of abundance and luxury are shaped by the things that we don't have. Do you know what I mean? Because I feel like Jen and I are in different places in our careers. And so I feel like I could maybe for the next 5 years work on one piece of art. Maybe I could, And so I think I'm not as focused on time as a luxury, where Jen is sort of juggling many things at once and moving through this big change in her identity and who she is in the world and career. And
yeah, and I feel like these are luxuries also. It's just not like the luxury.
I'm like, wow, look at all of these colored pencils.
Yeah, like have fun making stuff and go to work.
Yeah.
And I actually wrote about this just the other day. You guys were probably talking about it as I was writing about it. So I had a little bit to add on what I had said. I felt like creative luxury was because I have an example of feeling constricted within a dance community where I was a part of a group that didn't really, like every group has their individual style and stuff. So I had to be very cognizant of not oversharing certain choreography. But then when I started writing choreographies, I felt like to be creatively abundant, feeling like I could just give all my information without gatekeeping. For me, it's being able to open the doors and not feel like I have intellectual property over my work so that I can share it freely with no expectations and allow everyone to go on in their own way and take whatever it is that resonates and run with that. Whether it's a piece of choreography or something I teach about the fire arts. And so when I really decided it was time for me to break away and free myself from constructs, I got on Facebook to all of my dance friends and said, I'm going to open up 2 weeks. I'm going to be home all the 2 weeks. Schedule any time with me to come over. If you've not always wanted to learn how to dance with fire or fire spin, I will like have a set of poems for you. I will like have fans ready and I will teach you how to use fire because it's been such a joy in my life that if I can like share that freely with people so they can have that experience and joy, that's what made me feel like I was free. And so freedom to me a lot of times is abundance, and having to like take your stuff sometimes and like say, okay, I want to do this or that makes me feel so constricted. So I really love like creative freedom and no gatekeeping. Just let it all go there.
But it is interesting, and you've touched on something that like really hit a chord in me is this like how we value our intellectual property. Do you know what I mean? And I do think that it is a construct of capitalism. I do. I do think that because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise we're all bringing vegetables for the soup. You know what I mean? And we're all benefiting from the soup. And it's interesting to start to feel into this because it's something even I've struggled with in terms of like, trying to like price services. Like how do we compensate ourselves for the things that we're giving into the society when we haven't really fully moved out of this model that requires an income? And so it's just an interesting, sure, we would love to be able to give our services and all of our stuff freely. And we would love to be taken care of similarly by the people who are receiving these services. And so it's just interesting to feel into as we have not really fully moved out of this currency model. We're not really in a resource
Yeah.
yet.
And I think it goes back to those communities that we're talking about, where when you're being able to give freely to the community. I met a man at the gymnastics that I went to on Wednesday that was there, and he was telling me that the Northwest Indigenous people, they had like the conversation. Now I did look it up and I couldn't find it, so it's something you'd have to check for yourself. But it's now they're fighting for intellectual rights and like some of their art properties, like the beautiful Northwest Native Indigenous art, and some of the rights to some of that. But at the time when they were creating this art, when someone would come and speak in the lodge, they knew that they were giving that freely to the people because they always felt like it came from spirit. And therefore, it's like that web we've been talking about that interweaves through all of us, that all we have to do is tap on and tap into this, and it's all there for us. So does our intellect or our cognizance or like our thoughts, do they actually, that wisdom and knowledge, do they come from us or do they come from source that does interweave to all things? And that's why when we listen to people who are tapped into the leading edge, a lot of times of information, we all start talking about the same thing on the same week. And it's before we, like, we had to record it the week before because it all needs to get edited and everything else.
Yeah.
So here we are all like putting out information about the same thing all the time. How does that happen if it's really ourselves?
Yeah, it's not ourselves.
Mhm.
But I think the other component is like You know, it almost feels like, and this feels right away as I start to speak, I can feel that it's coming from lack consciousness. I recognize it straight away. It's lack consciousness. It feels like there is an opportunity cost, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, because we do have to bring it from heaven to earth. We do have to bring it down.
Anchor it down. Yeah.
Not have it just in our minds. It has to be on paper, or it has to be in art, or it has to be in a song. It has to be in a story. It has to be in the lodge, right? And so there is sort of an opportunity cost in my mind in terms of like, in order for me to do this work, like I cannot be doing other things, you know, like I cannot be hanging out at the mall and selling t-shirts, and I cannot be, you know, like there has to be this there's an opportunity cost there. And I do think that until we really move out of this model, this is sort of where all of the, you know, all of the people who are working to create these and, you know, to
Offerings.
create community, to create offerings, any of these, any of the things, like there somehow needs to be a, and I just live in faith and trust, you know, that that's how I live, that as I continue to do this work, as I continue to share the things that I'm shown, that I will be taken care of. But it's difficult to do. It's difficult to do sometimes, you know. It, like you said, it activates those like really deep safety security things in the nervous system. And I think the longer it goes on, the harder it gets, you know. It's so easy. You hear like wait, you know, it's easy to wait for like a day, maybe, or even a
Yeah.
week, or like what about a season? And then after that, it gets so hard.
And I think that's why I kind of went back to subbing, is because I tried to start some offerings and I tried to start some ideas of like charging for some of the things that I do really naturally. And I allowed myself an entire year of just giving freely, and it felt so good. And I felt like I had the most fun I'd ever had. And I just couldn't switch that off. I felt like, okay, I'd rather go back to work and then keep my hobby. This feels like a hobby to me because I do it with all of my time. I put everything that anytime I have, this is what I want to be doing. And so I felt like I don't want to ruin my hobby by having to monetize it, you know, because it does feel like the masculine structure, which I am somehow still resisting so much.
Oh, it's
And it's
working
not that
great
it's not
time.
important. What?
It's right now Venus is retrograde and we're doing our, you know, week 6 of the artist way. It's all about freaking money. So what a beautiful blessing and opportunity we're sitting in to like really dig into the nitty-gritty of it. Because I hear you. I'm doing the same thing,
Yeah,
Christy.
we're all kind of sitting in it, I think.
Yeah, like even Jen, you know, like it's hard to, you know, like these things that we do naturally, that we do really well, that we enjoy doing. Like there was a time, Christy, in society when that was the thing that you did.
Yeah.
And you were compensated for it. Like the thing that you do well naturally,
Yeah.
that was the thing you did and you're compensated. And so
Yeah.
you moved into this fucking industrial revolution capitalist bullshit. Now we're trying to like force ourselves into
Do
roles
we?
that do
Mhm.
not suit us, that we are not good at, that deplete our system, that do not give us energy, and that benefit one person instead of benefiting everybody. I think I have this radical additional understanding of this topic that I just want to sort of speak into really quick, if that's okay. So I think in my mind, this is my belief that I feel like as I'm giving into the world in whatever way I'm giving, and whether that's like, I find myself sometimes I'm having like intuitive coaching conversations with my circle that feel like free, or I'm tirelessly dedicated to my online community, that's free. I'm creating art, it's free. I'm writing, it's free. I'm doing grid work, it's free. I'm praying, it's free. And it feels like the reciprocity for those actions are that I will be guided further into the depths of this service. And it feels like the reciprocity is that I will be shown the next thing. And it feels like the reciprocity is I will be cared for, I will be loved, I will be guided, I will be taken care of. I will be, you know, and so as I hold this belief that my service itself is the reciprocity, I feel like I have very little intellectual space for capitalism because none of that stuff exists there, you know, like none of it exists. And so so we can say like it's struggling with capitalism. We could say it's struggling with the masculine structure. We could say it's struggling to, you know, create time to do the things. And I think really at the bottom of it is this other thing that it is not in our nature. You know, we're existing in a system that is not in our nature, and it is not in the nature of love. It's not in the nature of the divine. And so as we walk this path, we're really coming into this consciousness that serves all freely, abundantly, infinitely. I do think it's hard to like to sort of like even entertain these other ideas, these other constructs around like getting some blueberry money, you know, because blueberries grow for free, you know? And so it's just this, it just is feels like it's the further I walk on the path, the further I deepen into my own service, the further I feel like I'm away from solving this problem in a, you know, in a 3D kind of way, in a physical way. I'm just getting further and further away from logistically applying some kind of like, you know, I'm not gonna, maybe I'm not going to, you know, I'm not gonna
I
make.
think that's the whole point, though. I think that's where we are being led, is to remember that it is all here and it's all a gift to us, and we actually don't own the things, and the land is free, and we should all be walking it in ways that are more in a oneness perspective with each other and the earth. And so obviously, like when I go out and went out with Dan yesterday and there's hundreds of cars driving around me, I realized like I'm on a little island here, and I'm probably the only one in all these cars that are like really thinking that we should be in nature, you know, eating the free blueberries rather than going to the store to eat them. So I think like I had made this list of all these things that make me feel abundant, and almost all of them are free and come from nature. And
But aren't they all? Aren't they all?
Yeah.
yeah, unless you want to go into boxes and with fake lights and go to the store and all of that, I don't know that those are free, but like the things that I want to do, that's what is free. And I wonder if that is why I'm like wired neurologically the way that I am, to feel overwhelmed in those types of situations, is so that I can stand in this remembrance of what can fill me up without all of that, and that I feel abundant and content so often, you know?
Yeah, and I think we were just talking about this last night and this morning. I brought it up about this different wiring and how we don't feel good with the fluorescent lights, and we don't feel good with the way that how fast things move and all of this stuff. And maybe this is a great topic for another one because I would like to talk about it more. But looping back to what you said, Jack, I think maybe that's where some of the friction feels like it's coming from. You know, like wanting to just give it for free, because I do on many levels want to give it for free. It doesn't feel all the way aligned with where I'm moving, and I'm trying to find a balance here where, because I still have like one foot in this 3D world, you know, where there's rent and, you know, you do buy blueberries at the store, and then one foot in this other world that feels
Evolving.
like that's evolving.
Jen, also one thing I always consider that, yeah, we still like our talents and our artistic and creatively, they're valued. We have value and we have worth, and we have to know our value and worth. And I do think that's definitely something that should be.
And at the same time, on the other hand, we have to let go of this capitalist way of holding on to our intellectual property and trying to monetize it in this collapsing structure.
Yeah,
and both things are true at the same time.
Like one of the things Dan keeps telling me is that we're driving around last night. I kind of spoke to this earlier, that there's all these cars and all these people have to go create food and shelter for themselves, and that there's no other way at this point then to somehow participate in those systems as we live in this very winter cold climate and food is not abundant and all we would maple syrup. Like, yes, we could start fasting for 40 days and get through the depths of the winter, but ultimately we need to eat some food because our bodies aren't prepared in that way to be able to just sustain ourselves like the indigenous people did in this land. So yeah, we do need to create abundance that is also financial so that we can provide for our families and keep everybody warm in these cold winter climates.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe it's about finding the balance of like where you do feel abundant. And if you feel abundant in your knowledge, that's where you can kind of share. And if you don't feel abundant in your time or financially, then you have to find some kind of balance to, you know, in order to move forward.
Right. Yeah.
I don't have the answer.
I don't either. That's why we're exploring the edges.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I do feel like this conversation is happening now in this present moment because we are sitting in the middle of the collapse of the old and the birth of the new. And so we find ourselves in this place where both things have to be true at the same time. You know, we have to hold a foot in both places because everything's changing. And it feels like it's moving fast in the frame of reference of historical time, but it also feels like excruciatingly slow for those of us that are really trying to contribute to societal systems and you know, whatever the structures are that are going to support us in this new environment where we move away from, you know, the collapsing world order. And so it's almost as if, you know, we would not have one foot somewhere else if it was not coming, if it was not being born. You know, it is not a dream state. It is a physical, tangible challenge in our life right now in physical reality on Earth to move within both of these structures because one's dying and one is being born, and we are just sort of straight in the middle. And that offers zero practical advice in terms of you know how to navigate it. But I do think it just is fundamentally like a prophetic time in human history.
Yeah.
And so of course there are these questions about like, you know, how do we create the structures, and this conversation, this edge that we're meeting is to find those answers, to brainstorm these ideas. And there will be systems that are created that are even more evolved than I will trade you this drumming class for this bag of rice, right? Like even there will be more advanced systems of resource-based economies that are being developed through the work of not us. We're not, you know, obviously we're not economists, we're something else, but there are people who are economists, you know, who are interested in like structural systems of economic exchange. And like those people are also waking up to this idea that something is leaving and something is coming. And so, where we talk about the things that we talk about and exploring the edges, I really hope and hold this faith that there are roundtables of executives somewhere talking about the way that their business can work in a resource-based economy as opposed to a currency-based economy. And so I think it's just a matter of like walking through this incredibly transformative time with grace and calling in compassionate leadership for people in all areas of society, because this is just one pocket, you know, the even though the three of us are bringing many different flavors and talents to the table, we're kind of just one little pocket, you know, like we're not in charge of like, you know, architecture or, you know, city planning or economics or transportation, you know, like all of these things are going to have to come together in a way that serves the new earth, and everyone's going to have to bring their own stuff.
This is really kind of a great place for us to kind of wrap it up because everyone in whatever career you are in, whatever field of study, and whatever you are passionate about has something to offer this movement forward into a world where we don't have these constructs of financial, made up money constructs that run our lives. Because I think once we give ourselves time to heal and deconstruct in our own mind all the systems and the way that they interact with ourselves to keep us in a state of a dysregulated nervous system, once we can come back to ourselves, then we can take all the things that we've learned in this life. It's like our Chiron return, and then we have them to offer out. And we can offer that in ways that we do get a reciprocal, because people just are all giving to each other as more and more of us start to join this movement of looking at things in a new way. So I think that's like time for today. We're going to have to wrap it up for this moment, but thank you so much for being here and with us today. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please remember to like and subscribe if you would. It will help us get this message to more people, and hopefully we can build even a bigger community. We love you guys so much. Thank you so much for being here with us and exploring the edges.